Metrics, standards, KPIs, whatever you call them inside your sales organization, that's what we'll be talking about here today. This webinar is primarily intended for sales managers and sales directors who have to go it alone when it comes to setting metrics and standards. Or maybe you work in an organization that doesn't have an analytical approach for setting up performance management of sellers. Whatever the case may be, what we'll be doing is providing the rationale and the background information to consider when setting or changing what it is that you measure. Now, the operating principle here is that what you measure impacts what gets done, so that's why this matters. Before I dive in deeper, let me do two things. First, let me familiarize you with the BrightTalk platform for those who aren't familiar with this one. There is an attachments tab for you, and I've loaded up a couple of goodies, some resources for you there. If you are viewing live, are able to ask questions, and you can just chat those into me, and I'll come to those at the end of the presentation. You're also welcome to leave a review of the presentation, live or on demand. And please know that what you're viewing is the Deb Calvert channel here on BrightTalk. Within this channel, there's lots of other great content for sales managers and for the managers of other functions as well. I am Deb Calvert, and I'm the founder of the Stop Selling and Start Leading movement, the founder of the other BrightTalk channel that you'll want to check out here. That's the Sales Experts channel, also here on BrightTalk, where 63 other sales experts are also giving great content about issues that make a difference for sellers and their managers. I've been conducting field research for over 20 years, working to understand what it is that buyers want sellers to do in order to select them and to remain long-term customers with them. And in the interaction as well between managers and sellers, sales culture, sales effectiveness, all of this is research-based, and my background before that, I come from a Fortune 500 where I worked in sales and leadership development. I've been 11 years in business for myself here at People First Productivity Solutions, working in almost every sector and in every size and shape of sales organization imaginable. Here at People First Productivity Solutions, we build organizational strength by putting people first. And I present here on this channel about strategies that managers can use to connect with people and boost performance. So that's probably enough about the channel and about me and about the point of view and the background that are going into this presentation. But let me just say one more thing about you and I. I would really love to connect with you to keep this conversation going or to stay networked around other topics too. So I've included my email address. You also see my social media handle at PeopleFirstPS. Come on over to Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and let's get connected and network with one another. Now, as I said, what managers do really does matter, and this data attempts to take in a snapshot how much it matters. Notice the impact. I'm going to point you toward the left-hand column first and then the right-hand far column. But notice the impact that you as a sales manager can have just by measuring performance, measuring it in a way that includes explaining the standards that you set and then coaching on the performance gaps and the strengths that are evidenced by these standards. In between that planning and evaluation phase, you've got the three columns in the middle. Those are the execution phases and the work that you can do that makes you have the greatest impact on performance. Planning and execution stages, they both feature metrics, and the execution phases include training and coaching activities. There are other webinars on this channel that are going to speak more directly to those execution phases. For today, we're going to be talking about the standards that give direction and clarity about what to focus on when you are training and coaching and developing your sellers. So performance standards, they do matter. Performance standards provide clarity for the sales team. They help them to understand what actions they should be taking, what priorities they should be setting. And standards can help them, once they get that clarity, to be more intrinsically motivated and to focus on the right things, the things that will drive the results that you're looking for. Performance standards, they also provide clarity for sales managers. They give you clarity about what to coach on and why coaching on a particular activity will make a difference. When it comes to standards, generally speaking, less is more. So you'll want to be selective in choosing the standards to emphasize, and that's why I wanted to spend some time today talking about whether or not you're measuring what matters. And I'm starting with standards because, believe it or not, there are a lot of sales organizations that don't have performance standards at all. They've got sales goals, and making or not making the goal becomes the replacement for standards. And that's actually insufficient. I'll explain more about that as we go, but for now, let's just keep talking about standards because whether you have them or not, it's important to understand the rationale behind them. Now, it's easy to pick standards arbitrarily or to pick standards that aren't going to serve you well. So let's talk first about the standards you don't want. You would like to be effective. You want your standards to drive results. So to make that happen, avoid performance standards that do seem arbitrary. A classic example of this, I see it all the time, is a number of dials that are required per day or per week. Sellers wonder, where did this number come from? Did they just draw a number out of a hat? They feel micromanaged because of this number that's being measured that they don't really understand. The best way to substantiate the standard when it comes to an activity like number of dials is to make linkage. Make a linkage, for example, between, hey, here's what our top performers do. We know their activities and we know their results. There's a cause and effect correlation here. So we are setting standards to help people be equipped to know what activities are going to drive those results of top performers. You'll also want to avoid standards that don't produce the outcomes you desire or may even produce the opposite outcomes of what you desire. As a general rule, your standards should be focused on driving activity that produces sales, cut and dried. But there are a lot of standards in sales organizations that inadvertently, accidentally take away from selling time, and as a result, just by virtue of having those standards, you could be diminishing sales. You're taking the focus off the activities that drive selling. And this is really confusing to sellers when this happens because they're being held accountable to a sales number at the very same time that they're being held accountable for standards that inhibit the sales that they could be making. So be very careful not to have counterproductive or ineffective standards. Be sure to substantiate the standards that you do have and always come back to the question, does this drive the results that I need? And this all fits together, but we want to break it down first so that you can be sure that you're emphasizing what it is that needs to be emphasized and that you're not missing any part of this equation. So breaking it down, standards, they come in these four different forms. You may have qualitative standards. Those are around the accuracy of orders or around the finished product and how it was delivered. Sellers are held accountable to qualitative standards in ways like this. Are they placing orders that are very clear? Are their customers happy? Are the solutions they're proposing on target for each and every prospect? Quantitative standards have to do with the amount of work produced. So this can be, the number of closes. It could be the amount of revenue. It could be the number of calls, right? These could be activities driven, but you're looking for some sort of quantitative measure. And the focus is often here to the exclusion of the other types of standards that I've got listed for you. And if you are focusing solely on quantitative standards, you might be missing the opportunities to help your sellers be successful by using other standards. What I mean by timeliness standards, those are the ones that are related to meeting any sort of deadline, keeping daily records updated in the CRM, submitting orders and renewals on time, keeping appointments, being on time to your sales meetings that you hold weekly. All of those are timeliness kinds of standards. You will decide in your own organization the relative weight of these standards one to another, which ones matter the most. And the last one, again, depending on the industry, the type of work that your sellers do, but for some this is a big deal measure, and that is cost effectiveness. How wisely are your sellers using the resources available to them? This could have an impact on your overall cost of sales. This might be something that pertains to your expense management, but it's about using your resources wisely, not just controlling cost, but leveraging those resources in order to drive sales results that you're looking for. And then I've broken metrics. Those are standards. I've broken metrics into two buckets, the results metrics and the activity metrics. Results metrics, right, generally speaking, they look at things like lead flow and number of opportunities, the conversion rate, the booked revenue. You have to decide in your own team what results matter to you. Is it just purely revenue to goal? Maybe it's customer retention. Maybe it's market share. There are all kinds of things that you could measure, and if you need more help getting a handle on what makes sense to measure, I'd like to recommend a book. It's an oldie, but it's a goodie. It's still available on Amazon, and it's called Magic Numbers for Sales Management. I don't know the author. I don't really know the background of the book. I just know that that book has been helpful as I'm coaching sales managers and helping sales organizations because it gives you some formulaic starting points. So I put the link in the attachments file for you there if you're interested in getting some additional resources around what do I even measure. You might also think about measuring activities. What activities in your organization with your top sellers, what activities are proven to drive the results you need? How do you want me, if I'm a seller on your team, how do you want me to reach the desired results? How do others get to those results? These are valid questions. They're questions that your sellers are looking for some guidance on, and activity metrics give you an opportunity to steer them in the right direction. I'll come back to those in just a moment. Let's talk now about what to pay attention to as you consider measuring what matters. I'm a big proponent of paying attention most to the leading indicators versus the lagging indicators. Now, speaking very globally, economically, leading indicators, they have the potential to forecast where an entire economy is headed. Fiscal policymakers, governments, they use leading indicators to implement or alter programs in order to ward off a recession or to stave off other economic impacts that could be negative. The top leading indicators used to predict future economic trends include things like the stock market performance, manufacturing activity, inventory levels, retail sales, building permits, the housing market, the level of new business startups. All of these are leading indicators. They give you information that can help you to make some sort of forecast because of the way that these are trending upwards or downwards. And those kinds of universal leading indicators, they're good for you to know and to watch. Depending on what you sell, these can help you with your forecasting and your goal setting. But for your sellers, inside your organization, there are other leading indicators that warrant attention. Here are some of the ones that are most commonly used. This is what most people measure, if they measure leading indicators at all. And the value of looking at leading indicators like these is that you'll know what to coach. You'll know what skills need to be shored up in your sales organization. You can begin to help your sellers see the cause and effect, the correlation between their actions and the results that those actions can produce. And of course, leading indicators are future-focused, and so there's a real value in being able to be proactive, to be ahead of, and not reactionary based on what you're seeing. Now, in addition to these more traditional dashboard indicators, there are some other leading indicators that might be helpful for you. I like to introduce these to you because they are something that you might not have thought about using before. And I'll describe these in a little bit more detail. Let's start at the top. Lead response time. This has to do with how quickly are your sellers responding when an inbound lead emerges. A speedy response time really does increase the chances of advancing the sale. There's a Harvard study on response outcomes that showed sellers who contacted inbound leads within 1 hour were 7 times more likely to have a meaningful conversation with the decision maker. And other studies confirm that finding. So a a quick response time is a good leading indicator that you'll be able to be more successful. Another leading indicator you might consider adding is the cadence. When are you following up, and what's the rate of your contact as you're following up? We know that persistent pays off. We know that a National Sales Executive Association survey found that 48% of sellers never even follow up a second time with a lead. And that's significant because 10% of sales close on the fourth contact, and 80% are made on the 5th to 12th contact. As a sales manager, you need to know where your sellers are stopping and how long they're waiting in between those attempts at contacting your leads. Measuring what's working and then looking for those trends will help you know how to advise your sellers and how to coach them. And in fact, your pipeline progression should be based in part on the number of follow-up contacts being made. And if you can help your sellers to see each contact, as a necessary step in advancing the sale, then over time they will be able to see the value, and they'll develop an appropriate cadence of following up, and you might even be able to automate some of that work longer term. So it's a good leading indicator to know and to communicate. Another one, this is about your follow-up emails. Think about the best follow-up emails that you yourself have ever received. Effective reps create value and engage you with content that's really, really relevant. And that often means including links to content like a case study or a questionnaire, a white paper, some sort of tool that could be practically deployed by your prospect. But one leading indicator you might not be considering is the level of interest in that content that you're sending. So a bonus goal of this metric is to increase the frequency and quality of links that your sellers offer to the leads that they're working. So if you then find that's not happening, it means that you either need to get them more content they can use or make them more aware of what you already have and who it will resonate with. A couple of other leading indicators, and these have been proven highly valuable by a lot of other sales organizations. You might take a look at how your social media intelligence is being gathered. And this is another one that's very dependent on the norms in your industry and who your buyers are, who you call on. For some of you, this could be an unnecessary activity, and it won't provide a useful leading indicator. But for others, this could be a very big deal and one you want to get your sellers spending an appropriate amount of time on. Let me just give you an illustration, a contrast. Let's say your buyers are small business owners. They tend to have a social media presence so they can connect with their customers, and knowing what's on their business Facebook page could be useful. Knowing what the owner is tweeting about could be a great conversation starter. But what if, by contrast, what if your buyers are doctors and dentists? You're not as likely to find helpful tweets or Instagram photos or Pinterest shares that are related to their business. In fact, you may not even find doctors and dentists on LinkedIn. So there's far less value in allocating time to social media intelligence gathering if you're one of these sellers. And the very same is true in B2B. Some types of prospects will be more active than others on social media, and you need to figure out how much time is appropriate for intelligence gathering on social media and also for creating a presence on social media. Two more to think about. How about the usage rate of your marketing collateral? When I was new to outside sales, the office I worked in had carousels of product flyers. I sold newspaper advertising, and there were a number of special sections and supplemental products that I could offer to advertisers. And because this was back in the day, I'm aging myself here, these were all in hard copy format on this carousel. But I was new, so I paid attention to what others in the office were doing, and I was looking to replicate what was working for them. And one of those indicators I paid attention to was that carousel. When a new product was introduced, I presented it to more clients when I saw that other people, the seasoned sellers, were excited about it and doing the same thing. But if the flyers had been sitting there a while and they were curled over and collecting dust, that told me it might not be the best choice of a product to pitch to my clients either. Obviously, things are a lot simpler today. It's easier to get an accurate leading indicator by just paying attention to what's happening with your collateral materials. What content has the highest percent of downloads? What landing page do people spend the most time with? Which emails are opened and shared most frequently? All of these are leading indicators that give you solid information about your buyer's level of interest. Think, too, about sales advances. This is actually a really important metric for more than forecasting. In fact, I think forecasting from deal stages ought to be secondary for us, secondary to looking at sales advances. To coach your reps, your sellers, you need to know their individual strengths. Some might be great at opening the sale, but then have prospects bailing out after the proposal or demo. Others might be setting far fewer appointments, but have a higher rate of closes. The trends that show for each individual seller will give you information that you need for determining what skills to observe and coach. And knowing the win ratio for each individual rep will also make your forecasting more accurate. Now, what these all have in common is the opportunity to proactively, not reactively, but to proactively, ahead of time, influence results. Unlike leading indicators, lagging indicators shift after the economy has already changed. Although they don't typically tell us where the economy is headed, they indicate how the economy has changed over time, and they might be able to help us identify some much longer-term trends. Economists look at a number of leading indicators, including changes in the gross domestic product, income and wages, unemployment rates, consumer price indexes, the inflation rate, currency strength, interest rates, corporate profits, and a whole lot more. And these are not performance standards, obviously, that you'll be using, but again, they're useful to you in forecasting and goal setting, and they're helpful for sellers to be aware of and to monitor in terms of the impact that they might have or already have had on your customers and prospects. It's a good idea for sellers in general to stay tuned in to financial news reports and to understand the implications of economic trends. But for you, inside your sales organization, you also have your own lagging indicators too. Performance to goal is a lagging indicator. Customer churn rate is a lagging indicator. Anything that looks backwards and gives you historical data, anything that's not changeable, those are all lagging indicators, and they're not all that useful for driving sales results today. This is one of my very biggest concerns. As a sales coach and consultant, I see a great deal of time spent looking at what's already passed. Sales directors spend a lot of time evaluating the historical data and writing up narratives on why the team missed goal, for example. And then they go into meetings to explain it, and somebody else does additional analysis, and perhaps they put a little spin around this so that they can add it to the quarterly statement. And then it trickles back down into the sales organization to show the sellers how the group performed in that previous time period. And that meeting, in fact, all those meetings, but most importantly, the meeting with the salespeople, it's taking away from selling time. So this is a caution to you. Lagging indicators are of limited use, and because you need positive, motivated sellers to do today's work of selling, I strongly recommend against focusing too heavily on lagging indicators. Now, metrics and standards, we divvied those up a moment ago. I want to circle back and spend more time talking about each. Metrics aren't the same as standards. Numbers are about the results we need, but performance standards include information about how to reach those numbers. So performance standards are going to add context about how we go about doing the work we do in order to deliver what it is, the result that we need to deliver. Performance standards lead to measurable metrics when it comes to results. And you want to be sure that your performance standards are quality, that they are descriptive enough that everybody knows what success looks like, that they're specific enough that people who come into that job know exactly what's expected of them, and that they are observable and measurable. They aren't subjective, and they aren't subject to change from one individual to another. But instead, they're meaningful, they're attainable, and they help people to see what it is that you're asking them to do. The benefits of having standards are many. Here are just some. Sometimes I'm asked this question: why is it that sellers need standards in addition to the goals that we already have in place for them? I've had many a discussion with a sales manager or sales director or even a VP who believes, let me just give them the goal and they'll figure out how to get there. And if they can't figure out how to get there, then that's not somebody I want on my team. I'd ask you to flash back to that chart I showed you at the very beginning, the one that over on the left-hand column talked about how much impact you can make in the planning stages to boost employee engagement and sales effectiveness. And over in the far right-hand column, when you're evaluating standards, and in between when you're coaching around those standards, the significant impact that you have an opportunity to make on performance. The standards that you set will help you to clarify and build consensus and get buy-in and show the pathway for your sellers so that they can use those benchmarks and those suggestions in order to be successful. Now let's start putting some of these pieces together. We've got some benefits. We want to talk now about how to use both activity metrics and results metrics. When you are thinking about activity metrics, remember that activities are leading indicators. You'll have performance standards, and they'll include prescribed activities that you want to see your sellers doing, because you'll have done the analysis and you'll know that these activities, cause and effect, these are the ones that drive the results you need. Not only that, though, when you're using activity metrics well, then you can boost the confidence of your sellers because they know that what they're doing will produce results. And you'll be able to coach them on doing the right things because you know what the right things are, and you've got a baseline, a standard of what that looks like when it's being done well, and you can show them how to get from where they are now to that place where they could be doing better, using the standards and the activity metrics. What you'll also be doing is you'll be measuring how people do the work they do. That will help you to avoid situations where you've got a seller who's getting results but maybe not getting results in the right way. They got a windfall account and they're not building anything for the future because that windfall account is carrying them for the present, and so they've become complacent. Or you've got a seller who's ruthless, cutthroat, and will do anything to make the sale, and that's not so good for your brand, not so good for the people who have to fulfill on the overpromising that seller does. So by setting some standards, by having the right activity metrics, you keep things in place for the sales culture and for the long-term success of your team. When you're thinking about results metrics, remember that these results are lagging indicators. So I recommend avoid pushing too hard on lagging indicators as a means to drive productivity. In an effort to improve sales results, many a sales manager has insisted on increasing the number of sales calls or has driven up the requirements for new opportunities in the pipeline. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that, right? Those are activities, so long as they're not activities that might be misdirected. But what happens all too often is that absent qualitative leading indicators, that knowledge about why these activities matter and knowing that they are the right activities, without those, we're likely to have a higher level of activity that does not produce a higher level of output. That only leads to burnout and frustration and a feeling that it's impossible to succeed. It's impossible to meet the goals that you've set. That leads, of course, to higher levels of turnover, and then pretty soon you're in constant hiring mode and onboarding and more of the same. It's lather, rinse, repeat, and it becomes very negative in your sales culture. So don't over-focus on lagging indicators. Don't drive on activities just because you're looking at the lagging indicators. Look at activities that are the leading indicators that you know will produce the results. And if I'm beginning to sound like a broken record, it's on purpose. This is such an important point. We really want to focus on the activities that drive the results. So what is it to measure? What to ask for more? I mentioned that there's a book in that attachments tab if you're looking for those things that you really want to understand better about how to measure. All of this, of course, pertains to your goal setting. You'll want to incorporate the language of leading and lagging measures in your daily interactions with sales professionals. And regardless of what you call these measures, be sure to engage your sales team in discussions about how they relate to performance on a daily basis. Not weekly, not monthly, not quarterly, but daily. Sellers have to understand how their territory or their book of business is evaluated so they're able to bring those measures to life in the field. Right, so that's why it's so important that they understand the rationale behind the activities that you're asking them to work on. Those activities produce results. And if you're setting goals for revenue attainment alone, you're probably not going to hit those goals. You need to set goals for activities too. Knowing that they're the right activities, then being able to train and coach so that they can do things well. And don't forget, you're already paying commission on results. What that means is that if you're also paying a salary, you get to define the work activities. You're paying people a salary to do certain activities, and then you're paying sellers a commission to deliver on certain results. So just remember, leading indicators are activities and actions that can be tracked or measured during the sales process, and it's to develop opportunities, to build the pipeline, to be able to ensure that you will ultimately produce the results, the end goal that you're looking for your sellers to produce. Let me break it down for you one other way, give you a visual of what this looks like. I do strongly suggest that you be this transparent with your sellers to explain it for them in this way that they can see a cascade. It starts with the company's targets for the year. And then once the company knows its profit targets, it becomes a forecast of revenue, a plan for expenses, and that revenue that's needed from the sales division comes from that. The revenue that's needed from every single sales team, every territory, what's the territory breakdown per month. Those are your goals per month or per quarter. And if you have numerous products, you might even break it down into revenue by product. And that might be part of your strategic plan. Maybe you've got a particular product, it's new, it's innovative, it's what's going to help you to capture more market share. So perhaps you've put some goal around that level of specificity. And once you have all of that worked out, then there's a breakdown. Every seller within each territory has a breakdown of how much revenue should come from each product. And that's when it gets to activities. In order to make that happen, what activities do sellers need to do on a daily basis so that those activities drive the revenue for each product that needs to be sold in the appropriate measure relative to the other products that need to be sold? So every territory is able to reach its goals, and this then is working all the way back up to the company profit targets being reached for the year. That's my first suggestion. I have a few more when it comes to how do you communicate about standards. These are the questions that, whether they voice them or not, these are the questions that sellers automatically ask when you set a standard in front of them. They want to know the rationale. Well, where did this come? Did you just pull this out of a hat? How is this standard supposed to help me? What do I get if I perform at this level? What do I get if I do all these activities you're asking me to do? How does this translate into sales? Help me to see the cause and effect. And by the way, what support are you going to give me? That's a standard that I've never met before. How are you going to get me there? What training and coaching and support will you give me? What will you clear off my plate in non-selling activities to allow me time for these activities that you are telling me now will drive revenue? And how are you going to measure? How is this going to align with my other sales productivity drivers so that my motivation doesn't feel like it has to be split between things, but that it all lines up? I see that there's a system here. It makes sense to me. For any standards that you already have, you may want to consider asking these questions yourself and with your other sales managers in your organization. If you don't know, if you can't answer these questions, it could be a faulty standard, or it could be a standard that needs a little more research behind it. In all fairness to you and the organization, if you're going to be picking the right standards, they should have every one of these questions be answerable, and you should convey them very transparently out in the open to your sellers. What you need to succeed, if we're pulling this all together now, thinking about all the pieces, you need activities that are going to keep your funnel filled. You need a quality of an activity that's going to make all these efforts pay off. It's no good to say I need 15 calls a day if those calls are low quality, robotic, scripted, low energy, ineffective. No, you need 15 calls a day of a certain caliber, and you'll want to define exactly what that caliber looks like, what tools are being used, what research is being done, what insights are being developed, what training is being deployed so that the sellers are doing the very best possible job of actually connecting, not just making the calls, but making the calls work to open the door and open up sales opportunities. Of course, you want to be hiring for the right skills and training for the right application. You want to be clear and consistent with your standards and make sure that you have the right ones. The right ones are, you got it, the right ones are the ones that drive results. And as you're using these standards, now we can get back into the middle. Over on the far left-hand side, we talked about having the standards, and at the far right side, we talked about evaluating the standards. In between is what you do to coach and train your sellers, to give them feedback, to recognize and reward them, to set some benchmarks, to bring them to a place where they can master those skills. When you do this, when you work all the parts of that chart, you'll have sellers who are engaged, sellers who are easier to retain, sellers who do a better job of getting to the goals that you've set for them. If you need a little more help in doing that, engaging your employees and thinking of some ways to make your environment more motivating, the other attachment I put there for you is a sales manager checklist. It's a daily checklist of activities that you can do that will drive employee engagement, which in turn drives other kinds of results. So that's another tool that you might like to take away. Here's the bottom line. You're looking for the metrics that matter. You're going to decide inside your organization what it is that gets people to goal. And those are the standards that you set, the ones that you then help others to access and understand and improve in terms of the quality that they'll be able to use. And you'll measure some incremental gains. You'll encourage them along the way because you're aiming to intrinsically motivate them. It's not about you, carrot and stick, on the outside motivating someone else. It's about your sellers being able to get excited about this pathway that you're showing them, this blueprint for how they can be successful. You will be able to get them into this place where it's positive motivation and intrinsic motivation. Up in the upper right-hand corner, they're going to be excited about the work you're asking them to do, and they'll feel confident about their ability to tackle it and make something happen when you've laid out that whole framework from beginning to end, including the coaching that goes in between, but starting with setting the right standards and ending with evaluating those and looking for continual improvement. Now, I mentioned that there are some great resources out there about what to measure. I mentioned a book to you. Let me just give you one last piece in the time we have remaining. If you're thinking about your metrics, not just for your team, but for growing your whole business, then we can break those down into 4 simple categories: market share, market growth, market penetration, and market demand. These are all ways that you can increase revenue. There might be relevant goals for your sellers in any of these 4 areas. So think about these each in turn. Think about your business growth metrics, the first being market share. Market share pertains to other like purchases, your competitors. What's the total pie out there in the marketplace, and what share of that pie are you capturing? If it's important to you, if you decide you want to grow your business by growing your share of market, stealing from your competitors, convincing their customers to become your customers, then you would dial this into your organization in a way that sellers understand it, and then you would equip them with standards and activities and content for conversion and an ability to go out there and talk to your competitors' customers. But maybe you're growing your business in another way. Maybe you're looking at the growth of the market, and you see that, in fact, over the entire market, there is an upward trend, and you just want to seize on the new business, the new opportunities that are out there. You don't need to steal anybody else's. You can go and create your own. Well, that might be a different set of activities. those are going to be different conversations that your sellers need to have. Maybe there are some different tools, a different cadence, different goals, in fact, that you set. And so it stems from your strategy for business growth. If your growth is about market penetration, being able to go after the untapped potential, it's been there all along. It's not new, but nobody's ever gone out and seized it. Again, this is a strategy that informs you, and it's a strategy that should be in your mind as you think about what goals to set for your sales team and what activities they ought to be going after in order to grow the business in this manner. And then finally, if it's about your market demand, and that includes your existing customers as well as new customers and repeat customers, what is that total demand? How are you going after it to seize as much of this as you can? And what does that mean? How does that translate back into what it is you need the sales team to be doing right now, today, to realize that goal? If you're like most businesses, you have a combination of these 4 business growth strategies, but be very clear about what that looks like overall, because otherwise your sellers are making it up. If they don't know what the strategy is, they're going a little after this and a little after that, but they don't have the ability, most likely, to adapt their strategies and activities in accord with your strategy, your overarching strategy, and what you want to accomplish. So at a higher level, think this through strategically, communicate it through the standards that you set, and develop the activities that will help sellers to reach the goals, including the business growth goals that you have in mind. If you take nothing else away from this presentation, and we certainly have covered a lot, but if you take nothing else away, remember that the most important question is and always will be, what is it that will increase sales? What standards, what activities, what is it that will help my sellers to reach their goals? What do they need to do in order to accomplish what I'm asking them to accomplish? The standards that you have or the ones that you set, they're completely useless unless they are producing the behaviors, the activities that are proven to drive sales. So that's the philosophy that you want to adopt and think through and evaluate your own metrics by. And if you need help with doing that, give me a call. I have a team of people who are incredibly adept at doing this, and they can ask you the right questions, and they can help you to develop opportunities based on this philosophy that are very highly relevant, specific to your organization. We're People First Productivity Solutions. I'm Deb Calvert, founder of People First Productivity Solutions, and we're here to help. We would be honored and delighted for the opportunity to work with you so that you can set the metrics that matter most in your sales organization.